Filmmaker and royal journalist Robert Hardman joins me to discuss rumours that Prince Andrew is finally in talks to leave 30-room Royal Lodge, which is I mean, it depends on your perspective, really. Some people say it's crumbling and not properly maintained. Others say it's absolutely regal and opulent and magnificent. Either way, nobody seems very happy for him to continue living there. Let's discuss with Robert Hardman what's going on. Hi, Robert. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. It looked for ages as if the King wasn't going to be able to cajole his brother into any talks about possibly vacating Royal Lodge at all, didn't it?
That's right, Vanessa. Good afternoon. Yes, the King had been keen to move Andrew on to somewhere more modest. But unfortunately, when someone has a cast iron lease, there's not much you can do. And that was the situation really up until very recently. The King had offered him last year. Said, look, if you move into an empty property like Frogmore Cottage, which previously briefly home to the Sussexes, you can go and live there. It's inside the Windsor security cordon, and then Royal Lodge would be let out by the Crown Estate to someone on the open market. But anyway, the then Duke, now Prince Andrew, said, no, I'm going to stay put. And the King said, well, if you do that, I'm switching off your allowance. He was still receiving an allowance from the King, not out of taxpayers' money, by the way, but out of the King's money. King said, right, I'm switching off that money. And Andrew said, fine, I'll pay for it myself, because there are very substantial maintenance and security costs. And now he's in the situation where he's got these huge bills for a house and no visible means of income. And whatever sources of income there were are drying up. So he's got to think again. So maybe it's simple maths, economics, is going to drive the Prince Andrew somewhere more sensible.
Except that none of this really appears to be simple, and none of it appears to be whatever it transpires to be, does it? For example, we had thought, had we thought that Prince Andrew all the while had been paying rent on Royal Lodge, and now we've found out that it's a peppercorn, such a delightful expression, a peppercorn rent, but not so delightful when he's only elected to pay it on a few sporadic occasions. We also found out, haven't we, that he hasn't really been paying his water bill. I mean, none of us has that option to decide, no, we don't really fancy paying our water bill. But somehow or other, Prince Andrew has managed only very occasionally and rarely in a fleeting and strange manner to pay his water bill. I mean, what's been going on there? And we also know he's meant to pay £7.5 million to doll up Royal Lodge before he moved in. And nobody knows where he got that money. And then nobody knows where he got the money to carry on paying the rent, except he doesn't really seem to be paying the rent. In other words, it's absolutely opaque, all of this, isn't it?
Well, it is, Vanessa, but I mean, so people are entitled to have their sort of, private financial arrangements. I mean, you or I, we sort out our mortgages. It's not public knowledge. I mean, what we do know is that, yes, he hasn't been paying rent, but, on the other hand, there was this hefty upfront repair payment of over £7 million. So it's complicated is a simple answer to this. And also when you've got something that's Crown Estate owned on a lease, I don't know the nature of the water bill. I imagine a property like that would have several different water bills because it's got something like 8 different properties within it. It's even got that rather charming sort of 1 to 5 scale Wendy house given to the Queen as a present when she was a little girl. An amazing place that I think, frankly, would make a great sort of public attraction. People would love to see that. But everything about it is opaque, it's murky, it's complicated. I think, at least if he did decide to up sticks and go somewhere else, he will be taking off quite a lot of the heat.
But it also seems that he never quite detects the mood. He's possibly obtuse when it comes to reading a room. He never quite gets it. He doesn't sort of detect the level of animosity and irritation and disgust volleyed at him. And certainly I've been presenting shows all week. I've been doing 7 shows a week for months and months, and 5 on the telly and 2 here at LBC. And every time I've asked the question, do you think it's gone too far, or do you think have you had enough of really sticking it to Prince Andrew? Do you think it's time to just kind of pipe down? Have we? The answer's always no. There's real anger, ferocity, and lots of righteous indignation, loads.
Yeah, well, I think there is this grating sense of entitlement, a sort of tin-eared approach, quite apart from the whole issue of the sort of Virginia Giuffre allegations. Just his general deportment in public life has not won him any favours. It's the old adage, be nice to people on the way up because you'll need them on the way down. Unfortunately, he wasn't particularly nice to anyone on the way up or while he was at the top, and now he's discovering that. He did dress up last week's statement as being his choice. We know that that's not the case, that he really didn't want to surrender his titles or his honours, but the king made it quite clear that either he could accept that, or it would happen anyway. We can do it the nice way or the nasty way. So I think these talks at the moment are heading in one direction. It's just a question of how long it's going to take and what the terms are. But he no doubt will be resisting, but that's where it's going.
But lest anyone think otherwise, Frogmore Cottage isn't a cottage, is it? We remember from the Harry and Meghan very short tenure, to most of us, it would be the most delightful kind of semi-stately home. It's got 7 bedrooms or 14? It was absolutely delightful place. And if Andrew and his ex-wife were to decamp from Royal Lodge to Frogmore Cottage, it would hardly be roughing it, would it? And I don't know how far, therefore, it would alleviate people's feeling of abused privilege and feeling thoroughly fed up and disgusted by both of them. To vacate one delightful property for another delightful property doesn't seem like much of a big deal, does it?
Well, you're right there, Vanessa. I think, whatever happens, the story's going to go on and on. Yes, certainly Frogmore Cottage, it's slightly misleading. It's actually 3 cottages knocked into one, and it's had substantial work done to it when the Sussexes were there. It would be no great hardship. But what it would do, I think, it would certainly sort of lance the boil to one extent, because Royal Lodge is such a sort of important royal property. It's where the late Queen grew up as a little girl. It's where the Queen Mother lived right until the end of her life. It's sort of out on its own, in its own little sort of mini estate. Every time you see those sort of images from the air, immediately it looks like he's living in some sort of quasi Versailles. Whereas, Frogmore Cottage is it is more modest. Don't forget there are plenty of other properties in and around the Windsor estate. There is talk that maybe he'll be put in a house on one of the royal estates, which are entirely private. Balmoral and Sandringham belong to the king. They're nothing to do with the state. And of course, I suspect once that he does move out, or it's announced that he's going to move out, I suspect an entirely new narrative will kick off on your shows, and your listeners will be calling him with a whole new thing.
Definitely be a great relief.
Into exile, and if so, where? Only today it's reported that he's been offered a place in I think Abu Dhabi as a sort of bolt hole. So years and years ago, famous old courtier Lord Charteris said that the royal family always have to have a wicked fairy, a lightning conductor, and boy, is Andrew fulfilling that role.
He certainly is. I mean, your latest book is called Charles III, New King, New Court, The Inside Story. And this week we saw these, depends on your perspective, but I think some people found very moving pictures of the king praying alongside the pontiff, alongside the Pope. And no question at all, the whole story was massively besmirched by the Andrew story, which is, as we've said repeatedly, shows no signs whatsoever of abating. It really doesn't. So I wonder, you've written this book about the king. You obviously have feelings about his personality and his character and his true thoughts on things. How do you think he's feeling? Do you think he's extremely angry or disappointed, or a whole combination of things like that?
I think he'll be, disappointed, clearly. I think he's fairly stoical. I mean, when you look back over the extraordinary life that he had, as Prince of Wales and latterly as king, the fact that for half his reign, he's been dealing with a cancer diagnosis. He's actually, I think, in remarkably good spirits. I mean, he genuinely enjoys being king. I think he feels this is a role he's been preparing for actually for longer than anyone else in history. And it has been a seamless transition. I mean, at the start of his reign, there were all these critics saying, the wheels are going to come off, he's going to stray into constitutional territory, cross red lines, all that sort of stuff. It simply hasn't happened. It's been, I think, one of the smoothest transitions in royal history. And right from the get-go, there was no sort of pause He gripped it from the start. He realised that in the 21st century, you can't have a kind of royal vacuum. You can't sort of hang around. And so court mourning, for example, which lasted for months when George VI died and Elizabeth II became queen, court mourning lasted for precisely 1 week. Then it was right, okay, everyone, come on, we've got to get this show back on the road. And that's what's happened. And I mean, his state visits abroad have been very successful. His incoming state visits have been very successful. I mean, the way he charmed Donald Trump, I mean, boy, that was talk about soft power. That was, I mean, we might forget about it now. It was only a few weeks ago.
But do you think he prayed at the Vatican to be less furious with his brother? Do you think he thought of Cain and Abel and Jacob and Esau and decided to pray for some kind of rapprochement or tranquil feelings? Do you think he took advice from the Pope and said, my brother, what shall I do? And the Pope said, let me tell you, my son. And what do you think happened about that?
I think he will have looked at that as a far, far more significant and important event. I don't suspect that throughout his time at the Vatican, I doubt he was even thinking about his brother and his tawdry business. I mean, when you're in the when you are right at the top, when you're thinking long term, monarchs don't just think about tomorrow's headlines. They've got to look ahead, or indeed look backwards. And when you think, I am the first, not just monarch, but the first supreme governor of the Church of England to sit down and pray with the Pope, since Henry VIII, since the Reformation, perhaps ever. I don't know if pre-Henry VIII, whether any England, or Britain didn't exist then, any English monarchs actually sat down and prayed with the Pope. My history isn't good enough, but I mean, I can certainly tell you it hasn't happened since the 15th century or the 16th century. And that's proper history.
Robert, thank you.
Years and years to come, that'll be what's
always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much indeed. Robert Hardman, their filmmaker, raw journalist at the Daily Mail and author of Charles III, New King, New Court, The Inside Story.